It's evening here where I am. My name's John Day, and I'm one of the developers of the CVI that many of you have heard about, and we'll talk a bit more about today in the workshop. So the Climate Vulnerability Index, or CVI, is the sort of approach rapid assessment tool we use to look at climate impacts in all types of properties, not just World Heritage. So I'm based in Australia, and I'm now retired. I was a World Heritage manager for most of my career. Thanks, Will.
Thank you. I'll go next. My name is Will. I am the principal investigator on the CVI-Africa project. I'm also very involved in ICOMOS efforts on climate change and cultural heritage, and I am the new focal point for that working group. And most of you already know me. I've been organizing these events. Jelson, could I ask you to go next, please? Hello, Jelson. I think you're on mute and video's off.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Jameson Monteiro. I'm coming from Cape Verde. I'm on the trainer of the CVI-Africa.
Brilliant. Thank you. Fatma, could I ask you next, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fatma Twahir. I'm the curator for Jesus World Heritage Site at Mombasa, Kenya, one of the CVI trainee participants. Thank you.
Thank you. Kanza, come to you next, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Khansa. I'm from Tunisia. I'm an architect, and I'm doing a master's degree in heritage conservation and site management. And I'm also one of the trainees of CVI project.
Super, thank you. Ted, could I ask you to introduce yourselves? You probably don't know many people here, so.
Hi everyone. I am Edward Pollard. Yeah, I'm working on a climate change project in Ireland and Wales at the minute. But I did my PhD over in Kilwa and Bagamoyo, finishing in 2007. I'm a maritime archaeologist, so I'm very interested in that. I've been going back. I got the opportunity to go back to Kilwa from 2010, almost every year up to really the last couple of years. So I'm not allowed to travel too much. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then Bagumba, could I hand over to you just to say a few words of welcome, and then we'll start on the actual program. Just to say that we're recording this as part of our CVI process. Okay, so Bagumba, over to you, please. Bagumba, might you be on mute? Hello, Bagumba, we can't hear you if you're speaking. You might be on mute. Okay, Bagumba, if you can hear us, you're on mute at the moment, so we cannot hear what you're saying. But Mercy, I've just seen that you have just joined us. So would you be able to say hello and introduce yourself, please? Nice to see you.
Hello. I'm Messi Mbogela, site manager from ruins of Kilwa Kisiwani and the ruins of Songo Mnara World Heritage Site. Thank you, Will, for welcoming.
Thank you, Mercy. I've just got a text from Bagumba to say that he's having some technical issues with his laptop. So I suggest that we proceed. We might move things around a little bit. And I thought that I would just start just by giving some background to the CVI-Africa project for people who aren't as familiar with it, and most people here are. And then I'm going to ask John to speak next, and then Dr. Pollard, and then we will move on depending on who is here. Just to say that Dr. Bushozi is unable to join us today, but has sent their presentation, which Bagumba is going to present in their stead. So if we can get connections working, that's what we'll do. If not, we have the presentation for the CVI process, which is most important. So allow me just to share my screen. And I hope that people can see this. If they can't, you should be seeing it now. If they can't, can somebody please let me know. So just by way of introduction, I've already introduced myself. And let me just thank you all for joining us here today. This is the second of our CVI webinars as part of the CVI-Africa project. And as I mentioned before, this is being recorded to assist us in later stages of the CVI process. So these webinars are not per se so much for wider public consumption or for larger groups of people. They are meant to be quite small to assist us as a group to collect the information we need to feed into the CVI process, which many people on this call are involved in. Before proceeding, it would be appropriate and always, of course, wise to acknowledge our funders, the Arts Humanities Research Council and the Department for Culture, Media and Sport in the UK. And I'd also like to acknowledge that this is a project made possible by a very large number of people. It has 15 partners on 4 continents, which makes scheduling very, very tricky. But it also feeds into what is a very rewarding and interesting project, which brings together expertise from a very wide range of places. So many of you will probably be familiar with the CVI project, but allow me just to provide a short introduction for those who are not. It's about exploring the vulnerability of African World Heritage properties to climate change. As we're all probably aware, it is increasingly understood that climate change is the fastest growing threat to both our global cultural and our natural heritage. And indeed, the recent discussions at the World Heritage Committee meeting in China emphasized the enormity of this challenge. And while most heritage sites are at risk, World Heritage properties are often more visible due to their iconic nature and their national and international significance. We've seen this in the recent IUCN Outlook 3 report, which looks at natural heritage sites. This was published in December 2020 and identified climate change as a high or very high threat to 33% of natural World Heritage properties. Now, unfortunately, at the moment, we lack a similar kind of overview or a desktop technique for assessing the impacts at cultural and mixed cultural natural sites. And so what the CVI process is doing is exploring the utility of an existing methodology, which was developed by Dr. John Day and Dr. Scott Heron, and it's wonderful to have Dr. Day with us today, and he will be speaking to us next. And it's called the CVI, the Climate Vulnerability Index. It's built on the premise that the impacts to cultural heritage are not only physical, and there are also heritage values and socio-economic values, because these sites are often very important to local communities and societies. So the CVI process, as we will hear later on in this webinar, initially identifies the unique heritage and socio-economic values of individual sites, and it then works with in-country climate scientists to identify potential impacts to these values, balancing the adaptive capacities of both sites and their associated communities. And our previous webinar, which we held 2 weeks ago, was looking at this climate modeling, and we were very fortunate to have climate scientists from Tanzania providing downscale models of climate impacts to the site. To date, the CVI has been applied to sites in Western Europe and Australia, but it's currently being applied to other sites all over the world, and the CVI-Africa project is about its first application to 2 World Heritage sites in Africa, and I'll come back to that. So the project has 2 phases. Phase 1 ran over the summer and it was about training. We ran a 12-week training course for participants from African different African countries, and it's wonderful to see so many of these participants with us today. Over these 12 weeks, they explored a range of topics, including climate science and literacy, heritage management and adaptation, and climate cultural heritage vulnerability assessment. And the second part of their training is to be involved in these webinars and in the processes we are going to now. The second part then of this project is about applying and adapting the CVI methodology for 2 African World Heritage Sites, one of which is the Sukur Cultural Landscape, and they are going to be holding their CVI next week, in the next couple of weeks, their formal CVI workshop in Yola. And of course, the subject of this webinar, which is the ruins of Kilwa Kisiwani and the ruins of Songo Mnara in Tanzania. There will be another webinar as part of the CVI Kilwa process, which will be happening at the start of October and looking at socio-economic values. So today's webinar welcomes a group of expert speakers, as I said, including Dr. John Day, who is one of the developers of the CVI tool, Dr. Edward Pollard and Dr. Matthew Richmond, who are experts in the cultural, archaeological and natural history of the site and its property. And as I said, Dr. Pastore Boshozi, who unfortunately cannot be with us today, but we're very much hoping that Mr. Bugumba will speak on their behalf. As always, there will be time for some questions at the end of the webinar. We invariably, with people joining from all over the world, end up having connectivity issues. This might mean that some people are able to speak, other people might not be able to speak. But what we're doing through this process is collecting information. So we will just be adaptive to that. And if people cannot join us and we end up finishing early, that's absolutely fine. So allow me now, please hand over to Dr. John Day, who is going to start off talking a little bit about CVI and heritage values and the breakdown of heritage values for the site of Kilwa Kisiwani. John, over to you, sir.
Can people see my screen?
Yes, I can. Yeah, although it's not in presentation mode, it's just in PowerPoint.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to get it that way. Bear with me. Okay, is that now better? Can you now see the PowerPoint? Is that okay, Will?
Yeah, but you're in presenter mode, so we can see your notes page and your next page.
My apologies. Now can you
there
see
we go,
the right
perfect.
one?
Yeah, excellent. Okay, thanks, John. Over to you.
Okay, well, let me just back up and start at the beginning. Thanks, Will. So what I want to talk about is how we understand what are the values within this World Heritage property. The reason we want to talk about values.
Sorry, John. Sorry, apologies to interrupt you. Just before we start, could I please just ask all participants to be on mute if they're not directly speaking? This just stops background noise and makes it easier for presenters to present. And I will use chair's prerogative, I hope that's okay, and mute people if necessary. Apologies, John, back over to you. I won't interrupt you again.
Thanks, Will, no problem. So why are values important? Well, the CVI, which we've mentioned a number of times, has 3 key components. And you can see values-based, science-driven, and community-focused. So when we say values-based, we've got to work out what are the values that we need to talk about in this process. And that's what I'd like to take you through. When we talk about World Heritage, there's a series of terms or a terminology that we talk about. So the values I've just mentioned, and values are identified because they are of some sort of significance. What we have in World Heritage are particular values that are being recognised as globally significant. And we hear this term outstanding universal value. And to be of outstanding universal value, you need to be recognised under one or more of the World Heritage criteria. And you'll remember there are 10 World Heritage criteria, 4 are regarded as natural criteria, and 6 are regarded as cultural criteria. So if a value has been globally recognised and contributes to its outstanding universal value, or OUV, then we call those its World Heritage values. Each of the above World Heritage values has attributes. And I think attributes are important, but probably underused. but attributes are the level at which management occurs, and we'll discuss this a bit more in my presentation. The other important thing to recognise, though, is that there are other values within the property that are not regarded as being of outstanding universal value. They may not have been recognised in the statement of OUV, but they're often very important, either nationally, regionally, or perhaps even just locally. And we talk about these as being significant property values, or SPVs. So I want to make it clear that the SPVs are not part of the statement of OUV, but they are an important part of the property. And we'll talk about how we might identify those as well. So how do we derive the key values for Kilwa? And I do need to apologise for all the trainees because they've seen a lot of this before. Basically, the first thing we need to do is to get hold of the statement of outstanding universal value for the property. This is just a screenshot from the UNESCO website. And if you go onto the UNESCO website, every property on the World Heritage List has a page like this, outlining basically to start with the property. And as you scroll down, you come across what we call a statement of outstanding universal value. Now, this is a series of words that are written and accepted generally at the time that a property is listed on the World Heritage List. There are some properties where they've done what they call a retrospective statement. In other words, they have to write it years later. But each of these statements follow a similar format. Each one has, or it starts off with a brief synthesis, and then it includes information about the criteria for which it's been nominated. If it's a cultural site, it also talks about both integrity and authenticity. So these are all common aspects for every statement of OUV. So we've got a whole series of words, and some of these statements are quite lengthy. In the property that I deal with, the Great Barrier Reef, it runs for about 5 pages. But how do you take a detailed and comprehensive set of words and understand what are the key values? Well, the process we've used in the CVI is to effectively take the words from the statement and put it into a Word document. So you end up with literally the same words in a Word document. And then we go through and we start highlighting the keywords. So I haven't done this as carefully as I needed to, but effectively you'll get the idea. So on the left-hand side, we've got the original statement. On the right-hand side, you can see we've started highlighting keywords. In the blue, I'm obviously seeing Kilwa as an important part of the statement. And in the more browny colour, I've started recognising Songo, Mnara. And then as I move on the statement, I start finding there's other keywords or key sentences about a different aspect. So here in green, we start talking about the trading history. And as we move through and highlight key parts of the overall statement, you can see we end up with colour coding, a sort of a different colours for the different key parts of the statement. So all the bits in the light blue refer to Kilwa, all the bits in the browny colour talk about Songo, the bits in green about the trading history, the bits in that, the colours in that sort of darker green are talking about its diverse cultural history. So we end up with the statement colour-coded and highlighting different aspects of the key values. Once we've done the entire statement in this form, we can then start taking similar colours and putting them into a table. So in the central column here, you can see the excerpts and the dark blue ones, or sorry, the light blue ones at the top, the green ones together. And then below that is that colour. It's a bit too dark, so I've actually just put in a highlight around the edge. Same with the moving on, we get the different colours and we bring them together into a list. And once we've done that, then we can start choosing a couple of words that relate to each of these excerpt groupings. So back to the blue, I've decided to say the key values for the light blue relate to the ruins of Kilwa Kisiwani. The green, I'm saying, is to do with the Swahili trading history. The next is the diverse cultural history. So the idea is to try and find words that I identify these broad groupings. We move through. The yellow is talking about the Great Mosque, which is obviously an important value. But the pink talks about the other key values in the site. The red about some of the archaeological remains, and then the brown, as I said, for Songo Mnara. So this is just one way of breaking down that detailed statement of OUV into a series of excerpts and then giving those excerpts a key title or series of words. And so we end up with these 7 key values for the property. Now, I'm not saying from the other side of the world I've got this right, and those people like Mercy and Bugumba who know the property so much better than I do might be able to suggest better words or better groupings. But it's really trying to take that broad statement and break it down into a set of key values, because this is one of the aspects that we work through on the CVI. We look at the key climate stresses on these key values. I want to stress a couple of things. The term OUV is a singular term. Sometimes you hear people talk about outstanding universal values. That's not correct. A site is inscribed because it is of outstanding universal value on the list. But it's quite appropriate to talk about the heritage values or the cultural values or even the World Heritage values for which a site is inscribed. The term OUV is singular. A statement may also refer to both values and attributes. And we'll come back to this a bit more in a minute. As I said before, when you're managing your site, it's really important to identify and prioritize those key attributes, because managers don't have enough resources generally to do everything, so they have to prioritize. So we reckon that identifying and monitoring your attributes is an essential step towards an effective values-based management approach. So here on the right-hand side, I've started listing what might be some of the attributes. Now, again, I'm doing this from the other side of the world, and I'm sure Mercy and Bugumba and all you people who've been to the site will be able to prepare a much better list. But what we can see is there's some tangible and some intangible attributes for each of the key values. And again, this is the level at which we manage these values. And it's important that we identify them and then prioritize them for management. We move on through the list of key values. Again, you can see what are the tangible and intangible attributes. Now, in some cases, I can't identify, so I've just left question marks. But again, in the CVI workshop, when we work with the local people, the people who actually know the property, we'll get them to identify these attributes. I also want to stress that the values in a World Heritage site really depend on the groups that basically ascribe those values. And values can change over time. We can have shifts in how people see values, or new knowledge is obtained, say if we discover new species. Also, values can be temporal. So as I said, they can change. But the statement that we use is fixed in time at the date of inscription. So it's important to recognize it is a baseline against which we can look at things and how they, as properties, how they've changed. But it's also important to recognize that the statement does not list all the values of importance for a World Heritage property. And if I can explain that another way, here is a make-up property, and on the left-hand side, you can see the 10 World Heritage criteria. And this property has values in criteria 1, 2, 4, 7, 9. It may be also recognised to be globally significant for another reason. Maybe it's a Ramsar site or it's a biosphere reserve or something. So these are basically international recognition of the values. But if you go to that site and you talk to the managers and the locals, they might have a very different set of values. And some of these might, as I said, be locally significant or nationally significant, and some may even be regionally significant. But you'll find there will be some overlap with the UNESCO values, but in many properties, there's not a total overlap. And it's these values on the right-hand side in the green here that are really important for management of the property. We need to recognise that they're not all covered in that statement of OUV. So the important thing is that climate change is impacting all these values, not just the ones in the statement of OUV. And so when we're looking at climate change and CVI, we want to identify the full suite. So what about these other values? How do we recognise what they are? Well, again, it's the people who know the property. And again, what we ask them to do in the workshop approach is to highlight other values, whether they're tangible or intangible, whether they're economic, social, spiritual, aesthetic. All these values are important and they may be significant. Some of them may be even regarded under local or regional bylaws or even national legislation. But if they're not in the statement of OUV, we don't basically assess them under the rapid assessment process of the CVI. But it's important we recognise these and we highlight them, and we call them these significant property values, or SPVs. As I said, we can choose other headings, and it's important to try and lump them so people understand again what we're talking about. And just by way of example, when Scott and I did a CVI on another property, a place called Old Newtown of Edinburgh, this was the list of, and it went on for about 4 pages, of the other significant property values that were identified by the people in the workshop for that property. So I want to stress all these values are important. The CVI process concentrates on the ones that are in the statement of OUV, but the other significant property values are still being subject to the same list of climate pressures, and so it's important we recognise them. Just to finish off, the other thing we do in the CVI process is we look at the current condition and trend of the key values. And what we do for this is we use a simple traffic light approach. So you can see good as a certain criteria, basically saying the site's values are in good condition, likely to be maintained for the foreseeable future, provided that current conservation measures are maintained. Right down at the other end of the spectrum, the red, the critical, where the site's values are severely threatened or deteriorating. Immediate conservation measures are needed to maintain or restore the values over the short to medium term. So that's looking at current condition. We also look at the trend. So I'm not sure if I got this right. I pinched a slide of another one, but the date of inscription of Kilwa is important. And then we need to consider, since that date of inscription, have the values stayed stable? Are they improving? Are they deteriorating? Or is it really unknown? And again, for some properties, you're going to have a lot of question marks because you really don't know. But if you are aware that the values are deteriorating or improving or stable, it's important we go through and assess this to get again a benchmark of what's happening with your key values. So I'll leave it there, but that was really just an introduction. Again, I apologise to all the CVI trainees because you've seen this before, but hopefully for those who haven't seen it can understand A, the importance of values, B, the difference between the key values from the OUV and the other significant property values. And I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Brilliant. John, thank you very much for that. And I think that really sets up this wider question of values and significance for the rest of the webinar very well. I'd like to now, if I could, introduce Matthew Richmond, who I've had the pleasure of chatting to several times in the last few weeks as we've talked about this. Matt joined us, but he might have to rush off in a little bit, which I'm aware of. And so just thank you so much for joining us today, Matt. And Matt's probably going to touch more on some of those other site values. So, and I'll let you introduce yourself, but we had talked before on the intersection between natural and cultural values, and it was one of the reasons we were so keen to have you speak to us today. So I'm going to hand over to you. Welcome, and thanks very much.
Thank you, Will. And Assalamu alaikum for those of you who are in Tanzania. It's a pleasure to be here. And my name is Matt Richmond. I was based in Tanzania for 28 years. 9 years I lived in Zanzibar, and then I moved to Dar es Salaam, set up my own consulting company. I'm a marine scientist, have a PhD in biodiversity from the West Indian Ocean. And I've worked up and down the coast of Tanzania in various aspects of marine conservation, fisheries, natural resource uses. And I was very fortunate to be invited by a colleague of mine who also used to live in Zanzibar in the 90s, Stephen Battle, who now works for the World Monument Fund. And Stephen, who was involved, I'm not sure exactly where, at some point in time in the tens, in the early 2000s, supporting restoration, I suppose, activities in Kilwa, the World Heritage Site. And he was concerned about erosion. So he gave me a call, and then we put some terms of reference together, and I went down there and did a study in mid-2012. So we're talking about 9 years ago. And I've been there before, and I've been to Kilwa since. I've been to Kilwa Kisiwani since, and I've worked around that area. So it was a very short study, but it contributed, I hope, in some way to some actual changes. So I should apologize now that I intended to make a beautiful, smooth running PowerPoint presentation to be delivered to what I thought was on Thursday. And I just got an email now from Will saying, am I ready? And I almost fell off my chair. So I apologize for that. So I'm going to share my report, but I've done some research in the meantime last week, and I've got some new images, and to tell you a little bit of a story about what's happening to parts of the site. And it's mainly focused on Kilwa Kisiwani. I did get to Kilwa, I did get to Songo Mnara, and I know that Songo Mnara site is really also close to the high water mark, although it is fortunately protected by a big swathe of mangrove forest. So although sea level rise may be impacting on it in time, it probably isn't going to be suffering the kind of erosion, the real kind of brutal sea level rise influences which you get. And John mentioned it briefly in his presentation just now, the kind of threats to such sites. So I'm going to try and share my screen here. Is this the one? Okay, just give me a nod, William, if it's looking like you can see it. Are we on?
Yep, I can see that, just in case you can't see me nodding.
Okay, so it was a study of the coastal environment in Kilwa Kisiwani area to identify risks to World Heritage Site monuments and coastal erosion and maritime environment with proposed interventions. As you know, the world is warming at an alarming rate. And can you see this graphic here?
Yes.
Right, so here we have sea level rises all over the world, and there's one, this is from the latest IPCC report, and Zanzibar, fortunately, is one of the sites. So you can see that on the whole, sea level is rising by several millimeters, probably a year now, and it's going to continue like that for the foreseeable future. So there's a whole suite of guidelines on what to do with sea level rise, adapt, retreat, and all this kind of stuff, reinforce. I'm not going to get into too much on that now, but we know it's happening, and obviously sites around the world that are on the shoreline are being impacted. So, I went down to Kilwa Kisiwani. Now, I guess you all know the area, and it introduced me to the fascinating literature, which spurred all sorts of other interests of my own. But the objective of this study was to look at the environment, Kilwa Masoko, Kilwa Kisiwani, Songo Mnara, and identify the risks from erosion, and then propose interventions, and along with the costs, I think, of the area to mitigate some of these risks. So I was down there for about a week, and I went there and focused the study along this northern part of the shoreline. So here we have, guys, there's the northern staircase. Correct me if some of these terms aren't correct ones. Husuni Kubwa, in this area, protected by a big several hundred meters of mangrove. Then there's what's called the new jetty. And then there's the Malindi Beach, which we know now is suffering ongoing erosion. And the Gereza Fort. And there's a little channel in between, or was in between the Gereza Fort and this patch of mangrove forest. And then there's the Makutani Mosque a bit further along that beach on the northwestern corner, which was also and may still be suffering from erosion of the beach. So we were there in April, and it coincided with big tides. For those of you who are not familiar, we get equinoctial tides around April and also September, when the moon and the sun and the earth are all aligned. So, and that's when you get your biggest tides, and that's when you tend to get the most destructive. If there's wind and swell behind, then you get your biggest impacts often around about these big tides. So we got to the site and wandered around, got to know various local stakeholders, including the Wazee on the island, and we began to try and understand what's happening actually in that particular bit of shoreline. And so what we did was we measured currents. We have a, I'm just going to see here if I can show you the graphics. I have a current meter, which is a little propeller, which we can fix in the sea, and with it we can measure the velocity of the water that's coming in and out there. And that's one of the problems that we have here in this area, is in this mangrove channel, when the tide comes in, you get a very high speed velocity of current that comes through here. It's almost like a river, and that's undercutting the monument and causing the collapse. And I know that there's been all sorts of reinforcement along there. In addition to the current, this Malindi beach is also a bit more open-faced, and it's experiencing wave action. So you're getting waves that can reach the shoreline from quite a long way away, in fact. So I did a measurement, and I looked at the winds and the wave currents and the patterns. And again, apologies for this being just a report that I'm having to scroll through embarrassingly poorly. But sea level rise, and then we have, so here we have the kind of wind. So all this information is out there. You can tell at different times of the month where the swell is going to come from. So you see this kind of strong northeasterly, northeasterly during the Kaskazi period, when the wind's from the north, you get the strong northeasterly wind, and that will generate quite a big swell in that area. Okay. And it seems to me that the two main things that are at play here is a strong wave action from the northeast, which brings waves right onto that corner, as well as the strong currents which come around the monument here. So we can anticipate that these levels this was the present high tide mark at 2.9 meters here. That goes up to about 3 meters to 4 meters. So on big tides, you can expect the sea to be right up here. Okay, and that's, I mean, it's not going to reinforce anything by having the sea washing around there. So clearly, it's an area that's vulnerable. It will continue to be vulnerable, and there are some ways of mitigating that. And so I'll just cut to the recommendations here. So these recommendations were based about 9 years ago. Now, it seems to me, although I wasn't involved any further, that some of the recommendations have actually been picked up. So, okay, this is a crucial graphic here. So here's the Gereza area, and down here is the Makutani Mosque. This is an area behind these mangroves where at the time there were goats and cows walking around, eating all the vegetation, eating all the little baby mangrove seedlings that were growing. So through lots of discussion with the Wazee, who were very engaging when I was there, we walked all around here, we discussed what could be done. And one of the recommendations is stop the cows and the goats and just allow natural recovery of mangrove. So that's one thing you can do at almost no cost, just manage your livestock. The second thing you can do is you can actually plant. So if you can see here, this channel is pretty bare. Now, what I was very happy to see with some pictures that Will shared me, and you can see that, okay, can you see this picture here? So so there's areas of mangrove here. This is all new growth. Here, this picture is very useful because it shows the levels of the tide. You know, the tide comes right up to here. So this line goes all the way around the fort. See these lines of the different tides of the different consequent days. So this area of mangrove here is new growth. So in the intervening 9 years, there's been a lot of mangrove which is growing here. All these small mangroves here are filling in this space, and they're reducing that current. So they're acting as a natural barrier. And I suppose many of you will be familiar with the consequences of the tsunami and how parts of Sri Lanka were saved because there were mangrove forests. Well, mangrove forests save villages and they save historic monuments. And the more mangroves we can have, the better. They also capture carbon. So there's no discussion about mangrove. And it's a soft intervention. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It produces, it's good for bees, it's good for honey, it's good for wildlife, it's good for marine biodiversity. There's so many benefits of planting mangroves. On a larger, a harder, more engineering level, which costs more money here, obviously, And maybe the mangroves won't be enough to protect the site, because mangroves in the world, the mangroves are growing backwards. As sea level goes up, the mangroves are retreating because they grow up to the high tide line. So that's happening normally. But in many parts of the world, including around here, this fort, there's no land for the mangroves to grow in. And it's a common feature in many places where there's infrastructure, where there's roads and buildings and harbor walls. Mangroves cannot retreat. So they can only do so much. Now, there's probably other places around here where mangroves could be encouraged. But in the absence of mangroves doing more than they can, the only alternative, if there is interest in actually saving the gereza, would be to construct some hard structures and allow this area to fill in with sediment or sand. So there's breakwaters. You could build a kind of, those of you who are familiar with Zanzibar, you know, at Forodani in Zanzibar, there's this park that's right on the seafront in front of the House of Wonders. That's got a wall seafront, and the park is protected. So one could envisage a much bigger project to create a real structure around here, and maybe even extend along the seafront. But that's engineering. There would have to be more detailed studies done beforehand to make sure that the angles are right, that you're really kind of positioning the hard structures in the right place. You're not going to accelerate erosion. You want to position them in a place where, okay, they're going to be combating that wave action, and they're going to reducing that erosion of that fast current when the tide comes in and goes out. But it's also going to be allowing deposition to accelerate. So you'd get kind of sand and mud packing up naturally if you position your structures in the right place. Those of you who are familiar with the shores of many parts of the world where they have these groins into the sea, they're positioned to stop what's called longshore drift, so that sand can accumulate and it can protect the shoreline. So a similar kind of thing could be done here. It doesn't have to be kind of mega bucks, but you go from soft examples, which it seems like we've already started. If I look at the pictures from that Will shared with me here, see this area of mangrove, I don't know if you can see that, that wasn't there 9 years ago. So there is already some healthy mangrove recovery. This is a good view because you can see here that this patch. So that would be, if I went there now, I'm sure, and measured the currents in the same place, that flow that's going along the shoreline will have been reduced because of those mangroves that have been planted. So in short, there are ways of protecting this monument, and I know that the Malindi Beach area is equally suffering. That would probably rely on, I mean, a soft approach would work to a certain extent to reduce that onshore wave action, but you probably end up reducing the section of beach which is available to the boats that are going backwards and forwards to Kilwa Masoko. So, or you would create some kind of jetty that brings the boats to where they want to be. I know that there was that long jetty apparently funded by JICA or somebody other. I'm not sure how used it is, and whether there was any consultation or any kind of oceanographic studies. One has to be careful when you put solid structures in the ocean around shorelines where there's a lot of energy going on. You get it in the wrong place and you can make a mistake, and you can actually do a lot of harm. Okay, so again, apologies for this bit of a rushed PowerPoint based on a PDF document, but I'm happy to take any questions. I'm happy to add any more if you think, if there's anything else I can comment on.
Matt, thank you very much. I mean, I think I'd speak for us all when I commend you on your ability to give a fascinating presentation with about 12 minutes notice. So thank you for all the work that you did obviously to prepare, because that meant that you were able to do that. I know you have another meeting at 12. Do you have to run off for that, or should we take a couple of questions now? Oh, hang on, we can see your screen, Matt.
Okay, I can carry on for a bit, and I'll just check my email for my other meeting. They're going to carry on without me for a bit. So
right,
far
guys,
away.
Does anybody have any questions for Matt? Normally we take them at the end, but let's if anybody have any immediate questions now, that will means Matt could probably nip off if he has to. Anyone either in the question chat or just would like to ask a question?
Matt, John Day, if I may. Thanks for a great talk, really interesting. And I haven't yet got to the site, so you really gave me a good overview. I am concerned from what I've seen elsewhere about the use of hard structures. As you said, it might deflect the waves away, but that wave action then ends up going elsewhere. And so we get erosion either at the base or the ends of the structure. So how do you determine, you sort of indicated there was a need to cite them carefully. How do you determine that? Is it modeling or?
Yeah, you need some modeling. You need modeling for sure.
Yeah.
And there are engineers that do that. I'm working with a team at the moment on a project in northern Tanzania for the proposal of a jetty. Actually, it's for an oil terminal off Tanga, and they have to model, and it takes a bit of time, and it's not the cheapest thing in the world. But if you have the water depth, you have the kind of current regime, you have the kind of sediment that's present, and then you can put models. You can actually physically make a model to scale, or you can do it in a computer program, and then you can predict where the deposition will take place, where increased velocities or scouring will result. So it's not always obvious what will be the outcome. I mean, you can look at comparative sites and whatnot, but it's something that has to be done with quite a lot of caution.
And can I just also ask about, I assume the modeling that's done is then trying to think ahead for rising sea level, increasing storm intensity, all the things that we know are happening with climate change. So you build a structure today for today's situation. How adaptable are those structures for changing climatic situations?
Well, you can build in sea level rise, and that's fairly easy to put into the model. I mean, you can create some scenarios regarding storms and that. I mean, of course, you can't really predict what the storms are going to be. I'm not sure that it's not all parts of the world are going to have more storms. So I'm not sure that Kilwa has had more storms than it's had historically. Some parts of the world do. I mean, Gulf of Mexico, for example, but it's not uniform. I mean, you could throw a few of those into the model. Yep. Models are fascinating. It's a specialty really to do. I've never run a model. It takes weeks and weeks to put all the information in, and it depends on the size of your area. You create lots of points, and you add data for all these points, and then you run it, and you run the model, and it runs overnight, and then you get these different scenarios where you can graphically display where what's going to happen to the ocean currents, what's going to happen to the size of the waves, what's going to happen to scouring, and what's going to happen to sedimentation. So all those things are important for a site like this, because this is a really dynamic. This corner of Kilwa Kisiwani is a really dynamic spot. If things get a bit calmer as you go around down the side and down towards Songo Mnara, but this particular corner is a bit hectic. So it's all all things come in there. I mean, you could build an island, a bit further off the front of it, and that would absorb a lot of, quite a distance away. That would cut out a lot of the wave action or a barrier or some form.
Right, thank you.
There's different approaches.
And it reminds me of that great quote by George Box: "All models are wrong, but some of them are useful." And it's always worth remembering when we talk about modeling. Now, I think probably most important person to hear from here is Mercy, who has her hand up and has been in charge of many of the incredible adaptations that have happened at this site in recent years. So Mercy, if I could come to you, and then maybe Fatma and Jailson, I see questions, but we might move those to the end of the session just so that we can continue with our speakers, because I know a lot of people are working on the timetable here. So Mercy, sorry, over to you, please. Mercy, you're actually muted at the moment. Sorry, could I ask you to unmute? There you go, brilliant. Sorry, Mercy.
Okay, thank you, Willie. It's not a question. It's just to thank Mr. Matthew Richmond for a good presentation. on the research he did at Kilwa Kisiwani and Songo Mnara on the issue of climate. I have not seen some of the mitigation measures he explained about how to protect the monuments which is close to the ocean, especially Gereza Fort, Makutani Palace, and Husuni Kubwa Palace. Grateful that in the staircase of Husuni Kubwa Palace, we already rehabilitated. Of course, it is really eroded because of the impact of wave action, the staircase of Husuni Kubwa Palace. But now we received the funding from UNESCO and already rehabilitated. And next week, we'll start the work on a plantation of mangrove trees in the open areas where the monument located, especially in the open areas close to Gereza Fort, Makutani Palace, Husuni Kubwa Palace, close to Malindi Mosque, and some areas to Songo Mnara. The exercise will start next week. But also, thank you. I have not seen some of mitigation measures you explain. You explain very clear about the construction of small breakwater. Okay, this also is a good idea. We'll construct mangrove, we'll plant mangrove trees, but also we'll work on this mitigation measure. Also, you explain about construction of sheet peeling barriers and backfill. All the mitigation measures I not see is very important to us. And William and other organizers, for this presentation, to be frankly speaking, today I've learned a lot of the things which is much important to me as a site managers. I mean, I will work on different kind of mitigation measures already presented, as long it is much help in my site and in my nation as well. So thank you much, Matthew Richmond, and thank you much, Willie Megali and the team for this fantastic presentation. Thank you.
Mercy, karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Nimefurahi kusikia maendeleo.
Asante sana. Wiki ijayo tunapanda mikoko.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
It's great that you're going to plant mangoes next week. Just one observation. Planting mangroves is simple, but it can also be done wrong if you plant the wrong species at the wrong level. Because if from a mangrove, if this is the low tide to the high tide, there are different species. Yes. There are 7 or 8 different common species in Tanzania. So if you plant the one that should be on the top of the beach and the lower the beach, it'll die. And if you plant the one at the lower of the beach, at the high end of the beach, it will also die. So usually you need to think about which ones you're planting and look what's happening in nature and try and copy what's happening. Okay, or get some professional advice. There's some very good mangrove planting fundis at the Taasisi Sense Baharini in Zanzibar and Chukiku in Dar es Salaam. And there's even a mangrove management project run by the forestry department, or there used to be, I'm not sure if it's still there. But before you spend a lot of energy and time, just make sure you have the right species in the right place, and also at a time of year when they're not going to get washed away by strong wave action. So if it's rough now, we're in September, so now is a calm period coming up. It's probably a good time to do it. It gives the opportunity to
again, thank you, Matthew Richmond. And of course, in the plantation of mangrove trees, we'll consider that in the selection of seeds, whether for Gereza Fort or for planting in Husuni Kubwa, depending to the nature of the area.
Sure.
And we will work closely with the officers, the expert of mangrove from Tanzania Forest Agents at the district levels. He will help us to select, of course, this person we involve him as expert to help us in the process of mangrove plantation. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
I mean, that was absolutely fascinating conversation, and one we could continue to have, no doubt. Mercy, Matt will be sharing his report, and you, of course, will see a copy of that. Of course, you're on the steering committee, so absolutely. I know there were other questions, but I'm aware Matt has a meeting to go to, and we have other speakers too. So I'm going to suggest we hold off with other speakers until the end. With no other speakers, sorry. Any questions, and we'll have a discussion at the end. I think Mercy and Bagumba are well able to answer general questions about site management, which are some of these things. And I was hoping now I could hand over to Dr. Edward Pollard, who normally lives just up the road from me, but is currently in south of Ireland, a beautiful part of the world called Kerry, working on another very interesting project looking at climate change related erosion. But I'd like to hand over to him now. Ted, over to you.
Thanks. Well, hope everybody can see my screen. Hello, everybody.
Yes, absolutely.
Great, thank you. Because I'm a maritime archaeologist, probably a lot of the values I'll be trying to bring up here are going to be from that perspective. So yeah, I'll probably bring I'll structure this talk as well. Probably bring it from the under the water more and bring it up more in the intertidal zone, and then the port itself of Kilwa and Songo Mnara. You're just starting, with the landscape change, and when we were doing our surveys and around Kilwa, I was mostly concentrated on the medieval period, but we do record a lot of the late Stone Age and the Middle Stone Age. There are Middle Stone Age sites as well. This artifact here was brought, a tourist found on the land was brought to the Antiquities office there in Masoko. And the fact of making Middle Stone Age material, or the value of that on the coast is very important, because that's when our species first started exploiting the coastal environment, and so it's worldwide importance. And in my excavations, and certainly in the first millennium AD deposits, we are finding late Stone Age material at the base of those areas as well. So just when we're certainly the value, I want to bring in the value here as well as just the land. There also is the potential for the underwater environment as well that is on the seabed. And here you can see the top right is how Kilwa Kisiwani Harbour the sea level is today. But certainly in the past, maybe just during the last during the last ice age, the sea level is about 100 meters lower, and you can see it's not an estuarine environment. It's much more of a riverine and lakeland potential environment in the past, which would affect where a lot of the potential valuable sites are from this earlier period are found or could be found. I know a lot of that data there we got from working with the University of Richard Bates from the University of St Andrews, and he did the multi-beam, the sonar survey of the seabed around to look for mostly for shipwrecks at the time, to tie it in with the land work we had been doing. And you can see this is the blank areas there in the top left are the lands where the boat could not go, but that's the map of the seabed showing the depths, and then we'd be able to find sites from that. And so the harbour. And it was interesting to hear Matthew's information he's got on currents, and because that would certainly affect the shipwrecks or the anchorage that we are recording here. There's Richard and Caesar Bitter from National Museums of Kenya. We're recording the artifacts that are on the seabed there. And these are what we're finding, quite muddy, silty conditions. And you see there's actually this rock that's in that top left. This should be more sand and mud here. This seems to be a concentration of perhaps a ballast from a shipwreck, and that's a good potential to actually underneath that, in the mud and the silt, there could be the wooden remains of the actual hull or other timber buried beneath that. Which is very few medieval shipwrecks found around the Indian Ocean. So it is a very high importance. Bottom right, you can see that the scale there is about 40 centimeters. That's an Islamic monochrome open bowl. There's green glaze. We've disturbed slightly. It's a bit blurry because of disturbed silt, but it certainly shows the global connections and the importance of these artifacts that are there on the seabed. There's even a rib of a large animal as well, just on the other side there. There's a local vessel on the seabed, and you can see the species of coral that are now growing around these. When you put an object on the seabed, how it affects the wildlife as well. And some of these artifacts have been brought up. I know Dr. Ishimbaki has started at the museum there in Kilwa the last couple of years. So some of these artifacts have been conserved and are being put into there. And yeah, we are able to get some educational value to do that, where we're training people from the Marine Institute in Zanzibar, the fisheries in Mtwara, and local people, and from the Antiquities Division in recording shipwrecks. In actually, we're learning how to recognise them on the seabed, so they can be reported. So we have very few, certainly not older periods, would be fine. So it was good to be able to do a Nautical Archaeological Society course and teach people how to. In this area, there are quite strong currents at times, but so sometimes when the tides change, it was calmer and able to record. And yeah, so I want to move up from below the low tide level into the intertidal zone, and certainly when Neville Chittick recorded. One in his recording was the anchor, the intertidal anchor that when I started in Kilwa back in 2004, it was on the beach there. I think Neville Chittick recorded up higher up, but this stone anchor has been found. It's been recorded around the Indian Ocean, and so you see the value of it there from like the 11th century up in Siraf in Persia, and but locally, obviously that tradition's been forgotten quite. Or they call it it's locally known as the Sultan's Bedpost. It has been moved from there because we were looking for it a while. I think it was moved locally because local people wanted to make a cafe as be used for tourism. With one of the artifacts there, it seems to have been broken in transit here. And last time I saw it is in one of the storage areas on the island itself. But you can see that there are very important links from these recording where the anchorages are of the vessels as well, and it's got the local superstition or legend associated with it. On the moving more to the eastern coast there of Kilwa Kisiwani, still on the intertidal zone here at low tide, the very sharp reef coral we can see here in the foreground. It has also got this black rock, and this black rock is basalt. As Kilwa it's a coral island, this must have come from a volcanic region, perhaps the Comoros. I'm just suggesting as that's one of the closer volcanic areas. And you can see it would be an area where the ship's hull would have been ripped open. So it's very likely that this, similar to the black rocks I was showing you in the anchorage there, within the harbour, is ballast from a ship. From a shipwreck, and there's the local legends associated with that the sheriff, there was a ship approaching Kilwa, he prayed on the reef, and if this ship is going to cause us any harm, but please stop it. And the ship was turned to stone, and you can see in the background there the natural coral islet there has the shape of a dhow. That's why they call it the Dewey Lajahazi, the Rock of the Dhow. And so it wasn't interesting. There's a story of a shipwreck here. We want to investigate, and that's when we saw the black basalt, suggesting there was a ship had been shipwrecked here. And interestingly, there's also local legends about the basalt itself. It's the spears of the Kilwa's enemies. So we record there's areas of basalt ballast there, and also sandstone ballast, which would be a local stone. And we certainly map the value with the areas of that. And you can see the black dots there are the basalt, the orange dots there are the sandstone. And just landward of the just to the left, you can see the greener yellow dots. That's actually Persian pottery from about the 9th or 10th century. So it does even give a date as the Indian Oceans to your right and the waves of washing over this rock. So we can actually even recreate probably a 9th to 10th century shipwreck that obviously visited Persia and was coming to Kilwa. And yeah, so we're within that area. So you saw the islet there of the Juila Jahazi. There's quite aesthetic places to land your boats within these islands. Mavinji has a little landing place here, and there are very linear causeways crossing the lagoon area where between it we showed that ballast, and there seems to be these seem to be concentrated along the East African coast, starting at Kilwa for about 120 kilometers south. They all seem to be made of reef coral. Particularly, you can see the makeup there in the bottom left. That's the bedrock at the bottom. The scale's about 0.5 meter, and it seems to be built up of reef coral. But what's peculiar more about in the Kilwa area is how straight they are. They almost seem to have been modified. I don't know how, as if must have been some cyclonic activity in the past or a tsunami. That may have thrown up a lot of this reef coral onto the reef, but then they do seem to have been modified. But in some cases, so perhaps to keep the coral, because the coral is an important resource there for the building of the stone town itself. And we do find a lot of the pottery dating from about the 14th, 15th century in this area, but nothing before. So it does seem to be the area when it was exploited. It also seems to be associated with the modern and the ancient settlements. That the one to the on the top left there is one of these causeways on Songo Mnara, and that's associated with some medieval graves in the bottom left, which are overgrown there today. And the modern village there, Gamla on Kilwa Kisiwani on the east coast of Kisiwani, is also associated with these, and they call these causeways the Barra, or at least one of them Barra, like a walkway. And this one on the southeast side of Kilwa itself, you can see Kilwa Kisiwani is like the coral beach, and then there's a causeway leading straight to it. So I don't think that's a natural way of the deposition of the coral onto the landing place, or perhaps walkway. And then there's the examples of them using the walkway as a roadway as the tide falls, and that kind of gets the value to get across the reef. I do notice I prefer to use it because of there's a lot of sea urchins and that very sharp coral on the that's in that area. So the causeways do have a very good functional way to access and cross to the low tide of Kilwa itself. And then there's a very traditional navigational value because the mangroves have grown up along the side of them, and in many areas, which shows them above the high water. So it shows you where the reef is, the reef crest, where you could wreck your boat. So you can go around them. So they do have some navigational value as well. And you can see from Lukula Island, that's just in the very entrance. This is where the causeways kind of start, and that's the very entrance to Kilwa, out in there. So if you've got a deep draft boat, you will need to kind of go around that island. And even there's a modern navigational beacon being put on that island itself, showing the value is still being used today. And yeah, from the 18th century, the map there, it's one of the, at least you can see one of that Lukula Island is marked from that period as well. But also other navigations such as the minaret perhaps from a mosque on Songo Mnara that the island is named after. Yeah, well, still keeping to the east coast there at Kilwa, you have a lot of the mosques there seem to date from right the 14th, 15th century, overlooking it's about 3 mosques from that period, mostly abandoned now. And on the top left here, we can see the Mavinji Mosque. It probably was painted white and coral white in the past. So it would have shone out very brightly, the 2 passing vessels. The view from it in the top left there is from Mavinji Mosque, and that looks out over. You can see a few causeways, the series of causeways extending to the Juila Jahazi. The view it's in that area, The bottom left there, you can see there's the caves, and I haven't tested the sounds or whatever the value of the sounds, but certainly it seems to be, it's orientated north, very similarly to the mihrab, where the mihrab would be of a mosque. And I wonder that's why was the mosque actually positioned in this spot over beside this cave. It's opening out that way towards many of these causeways. And within the cave itself, there's the grikes and clints that you would find on limestone areas. That's natural. At the back, there's a lot of reef coral. I think a lot of that's kind of gone now, but it may have been stored for burning. I wasn't sure whether it was natural deposit within the cave, because there are other caves but which don't have it. And the island itself, excavations in there do go through deep deposits of this loose reef coral. There's a few bits of pottery when we excavated within the cave as well, and bits of bone, which might be associated with the habitation there. So certainly lots of aesthetic values I was trying to bring up there as well. Yeah, like one of the, as I've been talking more about the east coast, but actually within the harbour itself, there's a lot even coming from the west as you approach Kilwa on the mainland. You certainly get lots of shell middens, and then within that there is pottery. This one on the bottom left is like 15th, 16th century. There's a lot of the tondo shell, the mangrove whelk, as they're just demonstrating opening up there and drying on the right. And a lot of the salt working areas that you find in these areas are also kind of in the same position as where we get more 11th, 12th century. From the, I would say 11th, 12th century pottery. There doesn't seem to be very much decoration on it, so that's where I'm kind of dating it around 11th, 13th century. And in these areas, and there you can see in the foreground, there's lots of pottery, broken pottery, which they're recording there. We're within an area that's now being presently used for salt working, or the salt with the economic value. Yeah, so continuing, as the seafarers go around Kilwa, you can see that we travel and how these monuments would have been used. From the sea, you can see where there's the Makatani Palace. I suppose as things get to be covered up by mangroves, you might not be able to see it as much, but this would help, certainly in the past. That's the Makatani in the top left. And top right, that's the Mnara Mosque, where the tower perhaps would have been that the island was named after. And but you see a lot has changed, and that's what sailing vessels would have seen as they approached the harbour there. Sikitiku Mosque in the bottom left but that was a place that they seems to be abandoned around the 13th century. I don't know that's why it's called Sikitiku, which kind of seems to mean sorrow in Swahili, but and there is a few graves there as well. But that's if you were approaching landward up the estuary on rivers, you would have seen that mosque on the right probably in the 13th century. And then bottom right there, just crossing the harbour from on the dhow from Kilwa Masoko, and you can see clearly the gariza there, and the line of that gariza is always marked on the Admiralty charts from the 19th century as the way you would enter the harbour itself. And so as if the Portuguese, when they placed the fort there, that's what they were placed to dominate the harbour, to let it the aesthetic, the landscape value of the fort itself. And they seem to have built it on an earlier house that was probably wasn't just as important as well, but from earlier periods. Yeah, we've done a lot of work recently on trying to look at the water management, because water is obviously important here. This is probably the more, the wealthier parts of society would have had the octagonal pool at the Hasuni Kubwa and filled that with water. And water is important as a port, in the past. So it's supposed to have fresh water for the visiting and supplies for the visiting vessels on their way from Malindi or Mombasa past Kilwa. I think at Kilwa. And so there's lots of cisterns. There's about 30 wells that we've recorded. We're very interested in this with the way sea level is rising and how that salinification is going to affect the wells itself. But they're drawing water up, and the more water they draw up, the more seawater will be brought into the well. So we want to look at the past as well, and certainly it's quite difficult in times with a lot of the 14th, 15th century. A lot of the stone has been taken away since they were recorded previously, and you can just see top right there. The stone has been taken away where there's rubble, and it's been piled into in the bottom right there. And but you could do this, leaving the evidence of the soil, where there were some dating evidence from that, but the architecture is being taken away and being reused in buildings, and that seems to be quite common. Seems in certainly the areas I've been investigating lately on the island. Within the buildings themselves, they certainly have more nautical evidence, sea level evidence. You can, not sorry, sea level evidence, but they more from the boat evidence. This is on the Malindi Mosque, the top left there, and you can see the engravings, the flag, the mast, the hull. The Malindi Mosque, some relations to Malindi in Kenya. It must have been in Kilwa well at that time. And you can, for this 15th century evidence of seafaring, which is in the here, which would be good to keep these valuable traditions today. And the Omani Key, you can to the top right there, you can see it's certainly you can tell how much erosion has occurred. I don't think it is from the Omani period. I think the seawall in the foreground there is probably 14th, 15th century. So you can probably detect how much erosion has occurred since that was built since then. With one of the wells in the bottom left there, you can see the importance. We tried to get the importance because they didn't want us to excavate right beside that well itself. Didn't want to disturb because that's where a lot of people come. A lot of the community come together. They chat as well. There's only a few freshwater wells today, so we respect those traditions, but we want to see, because we want to see because there's about, as I said, there's about 30 wells on the island, but only about 3 of them are being used today. So we want to know why were more used in the past, were they all used at the same time? So we've been trying to look at that more recently. Bottom right, you can just see the gravestone there at Malindi's being swallowed by the tree, becoming the trees as part of the graveyard. And so looking at the wells, there are excavations in this abandoned well just beside it to see how much can we reopen this well, and to see can it be reused for the water supply, as the community said that would be a problem. So we're going to see when was it last used. We excavated a few, and this one seemed to be used specifically around the 14th century from the evidence of dating the pottery. And so those continuing traditions with the baskets as well. This tradition, you can see it being used on and built on today for the fishing. It's been used recording of baskets being used since classical times, and then other uses of the intertidal zone there in the bottom right is used as a football pitch. Just showing as well, obviously, what the community would probably obviously value from the dugout boat, and I think that's being shown to be for sale in English, so that I was trying to get the value from tourists as well. They're telling the dugout boat. And then so it's more recent evidence of what were recent 20th century archaeology with the development of because Kilwa was one of the earliest places to be excavated on the East African coast as well. So there is that evidence with Chittick's Pier, where he built to Neville Chittick in the 1950s when he built this where he threw some rocks down so he could load down some of the equipment you can see in the top left for the excavations. And that tradition continues today with the house he stayed at in the bottom left, and how that's deteriorating as well near the coast there at Makutani, and Chittick's well there, which is a very old well, but he opened, but the local community use today, and it's called Neville Chittick's well. So yeah, just kind of concluding there with just some of the ideas and values put together that they haven't really been considered in the yet the value of the underwater landscape, and so the shipwrecks we have there with all the trade and the global technology that we can learn about them, And that's all associated with the legends. That's you can see about the shipwrecks and the superstitions about whales. And that's very significant is the reef coral, how it's actually formed on the reef is a good question. It's a good question. Needs further research, but they do seem quite unique to this part of the East African coast. The archaeology of archaeology is there, just discussing there about the history of excavation and that kind of value there in the investigation at the site. So there's the water management with all the cisterns, there's the wells, and how that's going to be affected by rising sea levels as well as coastal erosion. And yeah, a lot of these areas outside, you can see the stone is being reused. So this does need to be some kind of protection on the parts of the site. Is that okay?
Thank you so much. That's fascinating, and I think really just hit the spot exactly in terms of confirming some of those values, but also just identifying some new ones and different ones. I find it continually fascinating how we're doing this because of the changing sea, and yet it's clear just how the entire site has evolved around changing relationships to the sea and what have you. So thank you very much. We have one more presentation, and then I hope we can come back and have some questions. But I just want to see, Mr. Bugumba, are you with us? Can you hear us now? I know that he is with us because I'm getting WhatsApp, but he can't get his audio to work. We have a presentation from Dr. Pastori Boshozi, which Mr. Bugumba was going to read out for us. So let's just see whether or not we can get Mr. Bugumba to join here. Okay. In the interim, while we're waiting for that, does anybody have any questions for Dr. Pollard and Ted? So, question there from Jailson in the chat. How these variations in sea level and sea currents have affected the underwater heritage? So you had talked about us needing to be more aware of the underwater heritage and how these variations are affecting it.
Yeah. It was interesting to really hear Matthew's comment that there might be some data on how the currents are affecting things. Certainly when we are, if you will, so we did some diving on the East Coast, but it's just so much coral, and we just couldn't find anything. I don't know if that's because the coral's just growing over everything. So we can't really find very much. It wasn't very productive looking in that area. Within the harbour, the currents to some extent are quite useful because they do keep it kind of clean to a certain extent. So there's not as much deposition around it. So I think that's why the anchorage hasn't silted up there at Kilwa. So that's why we've got a spread of artifacts on the seabed and some big concentrations, which could be a shipwreck. And hopefully, if there's some wood, it would be buried beneath the some of the ballast, so we can then get some dates from the wood itself if we ever get to excavate one day. Yeah, so there's a lot. If I were recording, I did a lot of intertidal survey, was doing my PhD. There was quite a lot of so the longshore drift was always affecting along the coast there, time and moving materials. So I know there's a lot of washouts onto the. I find a lot of sites probably slightly more inland. Certainly the Stone Age sites around the further east there, because they seem to wash out during the rains and they land onto the intertidal Jangwani areas around there. So you can actually go inland. And as I got more experienced myself, I kind of realized I was excavating on the bay. I kind of thought at first, oh, I'm finding materials, but it was actually probably reverse stratigraphy, because you're getting the younger stuff at the bottom first, because it gets eroded off first, and then you get the later Stone Age on top. And yeah, so it's certainly, I think, a lot of you do find a lot of changes. You just have to take into consideration how things have been moved about.
Thank you. So can I check in? Mr. Bagumba, are you there? Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, hello.
Hello, great.
I'm here, but the internet here is really limited.
Okay.
So it comes in and goes out of.
Okay, well, will I try and share
Yes.
Mr. Bashozi's PowerPoint? I don't know whether you can see your screen. I'll put that up, and then maybe if the connection holds, you could speak to it a little bit. Can you see that, Bagumba?
Yes, I can see it.
Super.
Hello.
Hello, yes, brilliant. So we
everybody. Hello.
Hello, yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Revocatus Bugumba, working with the National Museum of Tanzania. I'm presenting on behalf of Dr. Bushozi on the values of Kilwa, particularly Kilwa Kisiwani and Songo Mnara. As you know, the site as a World Heritage has got a long history, and as many as previous presentations have shown, and as we know, is the great city or ancient city of the Swahili coast, and with a long history, a continuous history of interaction with the international community. As you know, Kilwa had a relationship with countries or visitors or countries from Middle East up to China through trade and other business. But we see in later between 1,000 years ago, like 900, when the first the Shiraz dynasty, Shiraz came to Kilwa, and that continued on up to the coming of the Yemen to Portuguese and up to British times and German. So it has got a long history. So as we know, through that interaction, there was some business going on, and as a result of which, we do have a lot of things, our heritage that are seen at both Kilwa Kisiwani and Songo Mnara. Another slide. Hello. As we know, through that trade, which came to the peak between the 13th and 11th century, Kilwa dominated the trade along the East African coast up to Somaliland, going south to Sofala, and said went up to Zimbabwe, where they meant to collect to get some coins of Kilwa. That shows the trade went up to Zimbabwe. So that's how they control the trade. They used to receive, to take the exported wood, gold, some forest products, and they receive some materials from those countries like porcelain and many other things. Another slide. As you see, for those who don't know, Kilwa is located almost 300 kilometers southeast of Dar es Salaam, which is the largest city in Tanzania. Used to be the capital town of Tanzania, but currently it's in Dodoma. So from Dar es Salaam to Kilwa, it will take you more than 3 hours. Another slide, really. So due to those interactions and works, so it's resulted to many things. As we say that that warranted it for it to be nominated as a World Site under criteria 3 because of the civilization that were existing there, and due to some civilization which are still going in there. There are some civilizations that are not performed, but some of them are still existing. As we saw from other presentations, we have some structures that are remaining over there. So Kilwa has got that what we say architectural value because of the unique buildings that are found in both Kilwa Kisiwani and Songo Mnara. You know, they are distinctive Swahili architectural monuments in their architectural design and skills, reflecting the lifestyle and parts of the area. Besides, they are on the monuments in Eastern Africa, of course, that provide more information on the building techniques and the periodization of the area. And some monuments are landmark or pieces of architectural styles found in Kilwa, such as Usuni Kubwa that has been presented by Pollard. It's a huge and the largest structure of its own kind. With a great mosque, we know that the mosque was built between 11th century to 14th century. It was the largest mosque in Africa, south of Sahara, before 19th century. So you will see that it was a very distinctive architectures. Kilwa is also, as we said before, historical values. As you know, that Kisiwani Mnara is one. I could say that's Kilwa was one of the most or best documented historical sites in the Eastern African coast. You will see from many books, from Kilwa Chronicles and others. The history and chain of history goes well in Kilwa than in any other sites. So Kilwa is a well-documented site, and as such, it has we could say that it shows us the development of Swahili culture and the growth of Islamic religion development in Africa, apart from architectural values. As we know, that Swahili as an ethnic group is composed of many coherent groups of coastal people that is recognized to have emerged between 600 to 500, according to Fleischer research, shows that Swahili as an ethnic group grew between 600 AD to 1500. So this development was through that trade network I mentioned previous that connected the hinterland and the coastal states along the West Indian Ocean, occupying almost more than 1,500 kilometers from from Somalia in the northern side of Africa. So as a result of this growth of Kiswahili, we have now the Swahili language that has been adopted by many people in Tanzania and Eastern Africa. As you know, the interaction with people from the Middle East resulted to the growth of Islamic religion between the 8th century. So Kilwa has got religious values, as we know that in the 11th century when the Shia came, it said that the practice there, the religious practice was the Shia. But later on in 1277, when the Yemen came there, the Umayyad dynasty resulted to Sunni practice kind of religion. So currently the site, the Muslim at Kisiwani, they observe they are Sunni. Most of them are Sunni. They follow the Sunni sect. And the school of, they say the Shafi school of Sunni. So from that practice, we see some remains that shows that Islam was a dominant religion. We have the Great Mosque and other mosques. We have Fort Sheikh tombs and the Malini Cemetery. All these are honored and revered by people. Sometimes people go there to visit. They have, we call ziyarah. They have sacred visits always. Every year they have sacred visits. They call ziyarah that are held in Kilwa Kisiwani annually. And the area like Fort Sheikh, as you know, we don't even take visitors there because it's a blessed place. We are not allowed to take visitors. Religious values, really forbidden to, but for Africa it's not actually called Mbeladu, found at the village. It's known as a holy prayer where festivals and the meetings are normally held. So Kilwa has got those sacred values. So as a heritage site, we do receive a lot of visitors who go there as tourists. So Kilwa is a good tourism destination for to go and see the development that started from many years back, in order to see which has resulted in those outstanding architectural remains and other values that visitors could see them. As you know, educational value also is there at Kilwa Kisiwani because, as you know, it's a place where scholars from universities and colleges have been going and doing some research for many years. So it's an ideal place for doing researches. And as Paul had just shown previous that we have also environmental values. As we see, it's an island, and when you associate with the environment, such as the mangroves and other terrestrial vegetation, such as huge baobab trees found in Kilwa Kisiwani, Mnara, are the source of attraction to visitors. So as one walked in the mangrove harvest, for instance, Songo, individual encounters with a new experience that brings together nature and culture. So that is Kisiwani. In short summary, that is what values you can see in Kisiwani. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bagumba, for that, and especially that final point about the intersection, I think, between the natural and the cultural values, which has been pretty wonderfully clear throughout this webinar. I'd like to now ask, just before we finish up, really to give the final official word to the site manager at Kilwa Kisiwani and Songo Mnara, Mercy Magobla. You just sent me some pictures. Would you like me to load them up, Mercy?
Yes, Will.
Brilliant.
Okay.
I will download these pictures and I will share them on my screen. Is that best?
Yes, I want to share some of pictures of the stairs which we already rehabilitated, the stairs of Usuni Kubwa Palace and the tower at the Songo Mnara Tower. I will share the pictures before and after renovation. Of course, this stair and the tower is eroded because of the impact of wave action. So for the first time, we rehabilitated, then next week, we started to plant mangrove close to the open areas close to this monument. So I want to share this. I don't know where I can.
Let me see. I can share the pictures you just sent me. Would you like me to do that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, thank you. Show the picture before rehabilitation. It's this one. Okay, is this one. So you can see how the site is impacted with the climate wave action. This is a result of strong wave action, which goes directly to the monument. So there is a staircase. When you want to enter to view Usuni Kubwa Palace, you are supposed to pass through the stairs, which is somewhere here. You can see people around the stairs. So this is how the stair looks before rehabilitation. And after rehabilitation, please show another picture. After rehabilitation, you can see the stairs after rehabilitation. The pictures we saw is the before rehabilitation. This one is the after rehabilitation. Another pictures of stairs after rehabilitation. This one. So you can see here is before rehabilitation, then no, please, another one.
Sorry, Mercy, there's a delay, so let me.
Yes.
Okay, hang on 1 second. And you can point me at which picture. So which one here? The
is Ngazi Final 4. Ngazi Final 4.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful. Is that showing now?
Ngazi Final 4.
Okay, hang on.
It's named Ngazi Final 4.
Yeah, gotcha. There we go.
Okay. So from this one, you can see very much clear as I show you the picture before rehabilitation, where it looks before. And this is how currently it looks after doing rehabilitation. So this one is on the rehabilitation of stairs at Usuni Kubwa Palace. But now we let's see the rehabilitation of tower at Songo Mnara before rehabilitation. Songo Mnara before rehabilitation.
So
Songo before.
Or yeah, I see it. Brilliant.
Yes, Mnara Songo before.
There we go.
Yes, here is a tower at a Songo Mnara tower. And the name Songo Mnara, it derived because of this tower. So the tower, it is eroded because of the impact of wave action, where the wave, it goes direct to the tower as you see. but we studied that the eroded it because that the areas is not covered with the mangrove trees. That's why next week in all the open areas, we'll try to plant the mangrove trees so as to reduce the speed of wave action to go directly to the monument. So next week we'll start a mangrove plantation. Then we already rehabilitate this tower. We can see the picture after rehabilitation. The picture after rehabilitation. Yes, you can see now. Last week we completed this work as we rehabilitate, but after rehabilitation, next week we will try to plant mangrove in the all open areas so that to make sure that the tower is well protected for future. That's I mean next generation, to assure that the next generation will benefit from this monument. Thank you, Willie.
Thank you very much, and how wonderful to have such up-to-date, I mean last week, pictures of the wonderful work and that is being done. We're somewhat at the end of our time now, and I think that Dr. Richmond has left us, but what I will do is forward on questions to him because he was happy to receive them after the event. And I know that Dr. Pollard has to leave quite promptly at 1 o'clock, as do other people. So I might just thank everybody who's spoken today, and just pass over to either Gumba or Mercy as to whether or not you'd like to say any concluding words.
Okay, thank you, Will. I don't think if Bugumba is here. I'm not sure.
Around. I'm around.
You are here, brilliant.
I'm here. Unfortunately, my piece is not good.
Brilliant. Bugumba, maybe then
Hello.
if I can ask you just to say some closing words, and if that will be okay. Thank you, Bugumba.
Okay, thank you, William. I would like to thank you all, particularly the presenters, for the good presentations about the values of Kilwa, particularly Dr. Richmond. I read that report. I got the chance to read his report when I was a city manager, and some of the works we tried to implement what he suggested. And it's my first time to see him. When he came there, I wasn't there. I was away for a trip. Then I couldn't manage to see him. I was very happy to see him, and I would like to thank him for his for agreeing to give his presentation, a nice presentation. I also would like to thank my friend, Dr. Pollard. I know he knows well Kilwa. We have actually heard from him a nice presentation about Kilwa, about other values. So my friend makes us a big challenge to see all those new findings from Pollard protected well, particularly the Mvinja, all the walkways which are found there. And also she has a huge challenge to stop people from vandalizing. I think you have a huge task, my sister, to do over there, according to what I saw from the presentation. Otherwise, I would like to thank everybody who took all effort to attend this meeting, and I wish everybody a good day and goodbye.
Okay, goodbye, everybody.